Thank you for that, and welcome back to the show. Rick Tittle with you, coast to coast and around the world on the American Forces Radio Network. Well, let's step into the world of endurance racing excellence because we're here to talk about the Rolex 24 coming up this week, beginning at Wednesday, going through Sunday. Lots of different events at the Daytona International Speedway. And joining us on the phone right now is Kyle Hanslovan. He is the founder and CEO of Huntress. And Huntress are introducing their Huntress-branded Lamborghini Huracan GT3 EVO2 that will be driven at the race. This is in a partnership with Forte Racing. Kyle, welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit more about this venture you got going here.
I appreciate it, brother. Thanks for having me. And you can imagine partnering with Forte and Lamborghini, known entities, as with a cybersecurity company, had some people raising their eyebrows. But to be honest, a 24-hour endurance race is kind of a natural fit. You know, a lot of folks don't realize what it takes just to be able to compete at that level. And I'll be honest, in the GT Daytona series, the introduction of that new torque sensor this year that's kind of trying to level the balance the playing field is creating all kinds of new intellectual property. So it's kind of a great on-track branding experiment, but a real-life protection of data experiment that's going real well so far.
All right, so people who aren't familiar, tell us what Huntress does because they know they are very much involved with stopping cyber threats.
Yeah. So we all know there's like a big difference between like Formula One and the GT Daytona series, right? Different levels of performance, different levels of limitations, budgets being one of them. And it turns out the biggest companies of the world tend to partner with people who secure the biggest companies of the world. Huntress secures companies from kind of Fortune 5,000 all the way down to the Fortune 5 million. And so that fit with Forte, who's, top of peak performance of the GT Daytona series. Kind of that, again, natural fit. And that's what Huntress does, protects computers, your digital identities, kind of anywhere that shady hackers want to try to get in to get your data and then make a buck off of it.
I always say World War III will be cyber attacks. I mean, I guess that's something that you guys take very seriously, right?
Yeah, so I was a career, service member. Before I founded Huntress, I did 13 years at the National Security Agency, actually like gathering the tools, stealing intelligence, helping protect our national security. So I can tell you confidently, if it's going to pop off, cybersecurity is going to be a huge part of that next World War.
I just remember in 2021 when the PS5 was available, there were these algorithms built that as soon as Best Buy or Walmart, whatever, Amazon, these algorithms would immediately buy all of them. And I think if you can do that, what else can you do with these things, right?
Yeah, right. I was thinking the first thing that came to my head when you give that example. Remember Taylor Swift? Like you couldn't even get tickets to that sucker. They had to make their own software just to prevent it. So if you can automate that, you can imagine what could they do to the banks, what could they do to the power grid, what could they do to the water. And that's, again, it's just all data.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the Rolex 24 because 24, that's how many hours in a day. And I was mentioning endurance racing. What is that experience like for the drivers of these vehicles?
So I've spent a lot of time with all four drivers, and you'll see that like any type of high competition, whether if you're watching football, racing, you name it, it's about having a diverse team. And so I was really interested, even before sponsoring, like, what's it going to take to win this sucker? And a lot of guys who, for instance, come from maybe open wheel racing, you forget you're in an internal cockpit driving at peak performance, kind of 4 8-hour shifts. It doesn't truly break down just that way, but that's kind of the way that works between the four drivers. And so you can imagine you're roasting inside. In addition to it, anything can break. You're trying to stay on the line, obviously, throughout the entire thing. And it's not anymore just about, like, can you go pedal to the metal? Everything's so well balanced between fuel intake, fuel consumption, how quick you can do the pits, that the thing that probably surprised me the most is they didn't try to bring four of the same drivers. They wanted every single driver to bring a unique skill set to make sure that you can actually go the length. And that kind of surprised me. I'm familiar with 24-hour operations, but not on the level of racing, so it impressed me a lot.
I know they have different entry types. Like you have the GTP, the Grand Touring prototype, you have the Le Mans, you have the Daytona Pro, you have the Daytona. Where does your Lambo fit into all this?
Yeah, so I personally drive a Super Trofeo, and I thought, hey, let me see if I can hold my own with some of these GTD drivers, right, actually doing the GT3 Evo 2. And it turns out, while there's a lot of similarity on the straights these races are won on the infield, right? How well you can corner, how well can you read the headlights behind you, even just being familiar that, you might have one of the prototype cars on the track with you. Do you know when to let them by, and do you know when to drive defensively? Even just the different radars and things for identifying, headlights that are behind you, to know that. It's stuff that when you watch on TV, you just don't appreciate how complex and how nuanced. It's not just about driving, for instance, to win. It's about sometimes when do you know when to get out of somebody's way that is, on the track but not against you, and at other times where you're saying, I'm not going to give you an inch. Oddly, these same parallels, like the cybersecurity, it's kind of very similar. You need to know when do you let legit software run, but when do you not give an inch to like a hacker trying to steal your keystrokes. So you could imagine we've been having fun for the multiple weeks leading up to this race, finding those parallels.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, the Trofeo, or the trophy in Italian, that's a Maserati, right?
So it's also a Lamborghini. So it's based on the Huracan, and it actually has just a little bit more. I think it's closer to about 620 horsepower before you put any governors or anything on it. So it'll get up and go. But it turns out the difference between that Huracan Super Trofeo there and that Huracan-based Evo 2 GT3, a completely different suspension. Everything is tighter on it. And to be honest, even the cockpit alone, as I kind of thought, hey, I'd be able to move from one vehicle to another. I'm as amateur as it gets, by the way, when it comes to these tracks. And it just kind of puts you in your place real quick when you see what a real pro drives. And if you look at the team, they've got some up-and-comers like Mario Farnbacher on the team, on his way trying to chase like the opportunity for driving in Formula One. Pros like Frank Pereira. He's one of the Lamborghini factory drivers, put up the fastest lap the other day in session 3. And it's humbling when you see real pros of what they can do, especially not just driving the car on the infield, but maintaining, again, what's the oil pressure, what's oil temp, what's the car operating at, what's the performance. And can I make sure that when I do that driver change that I don't, get my foot caught on just that little extra lip that's there between the cars, just to make sure I don't, add a half a second of extra time. Again, just an unparalleled level of performance.
On a personal level, when you own a street legal Lamborghini, to me, it's almost like having an aircraft carrier at Lake Tahoe. You're restricted in what you can do, or do you wait till 3 a.m. on Highway 5 and really let her rip?
So I'm a junkie. I do this not just because I like it, but I do this because it's a lifestyle. I think with a lot of your listeners as well. And so I'm the guy that's going to show up to Cars and Coffee, and I might be able to slam the throttle a little bit and get her sideways. But you're right, it's not safe when you're looking at this level of performance going into some of these corners at a couple hundred miles, and then it's either all throttle to all brake to all steering. You're right. If you live that life, it's either Fast and the Furious or it's the track. And so I realized real quick, if I wanted to, find that adrenaline hit, it was time to move it to the track. And what's wild about racing is, the same amount of fun I'm having in my Lamborghini, I look to the guy to the right of me who's learning how to drive in his, Mazda Miata, and he's having just the same amount of fun, oftentimes cooking me in the corners. So it's just been a great experience.
I've been speaking with Kyle Hanslovan. He is the CEO and founder of Huntress, and they're doing a deal, as I mentioned, with Forte Racing, and the Lamborghini Huracan GT3 EVO2 will be part of the Rolex 24 at the Daytona International Speedway. You can check it out Saturday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Kyle, online, where do we go to find out more about Huntress?
Yeah, it's just huntress.com. You'll be able to learn all about the shady stuff we chase down, when we're not just chasing down editors on the track.
All right, watch out for those commies out there. Thanks, Kyle.
I'll do my best, brother. You have yourself a good one. Thanks again.